stats. Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Neighbors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
Welcome. It's another rendition of your Been There, Done That podcast. I am Mike Neighbors, and boy, can you sniff it? Football season right around the corner. We were at minicamp all 3 days for the New Orleans Saints. This is your minicamp wrap, and we're going to have a lot for you. We're going to have Scott Shanle. He's on vacation, but we're still going to bring him in on vacation to give you great perspective on how it feels to be an NFL veteran and put up with minicamp. He gives us great reaction to that stuff he couldn't say when I interviewed him as a player. We're going to have a couple one-on-ones with integral parts of the New Orleans Saints. First, Alex Anzalone, big linebacker theme, Shanle then Anzalone. Of course, Anzalone, a huge part of that 2017 mega class for the New Orleans Saints, but he was hurt his rookie season. Wasn't hurt last year, and you saw the impact he made. It seemed like every week he made an impact, and we talked about how much better this defense is going to be with more experience. And then we're going to have a real interesting interview with kicker Wil Lutz. I always wanted to ask him, Sean Payton put a lot of pressure on him because he had two veterans in camp that year, and he cut them both because he came out and said, you know what, our kicker is going to be Wil Lutz because he had a great tryout. I mean, it's hard enough to be a rookie in the NFL, and you have pressure, but when your head coach says he put on a clinic basically in this tryout, we go inside. He gives us really some details of what happened in that tryout. And he didn't even think he made the team. He also talks about the thoughts of going to law school if he wasn't a kicker, and we put Wil Lutz to the test with more likely. But I'm going to bring in Justin Thomas. And Justin, you know what? In terms of this mini camp, a lot of times two things happen with mini camps. They're extremely boring, or you don't get a lot of headlines. I'm actually going to add a third thing. Then people exaggerate stuff. They go all crazy if a guy does well. What stood out for you for this mini camp?
Well, I was excited for the Rishard Matthews signing. I think that's going to be a huge help for the wide receivers. He's really talented, and with all the struggles of injuries of some of the receivers last year, I definitely think he'll be able to step in. Probably will have the number 3 position. But I think overall, the thing I was most excited about from minicamp was the contract extension of Cam Jordan. When you have players in the league signing huge contracts at the edge position and really the defensive line position, it's great to see someone like Cam want to stay with the Saints. The amount of money we were able to get him to stay till 2023, I thought was a really good deal. And so it'll be great to have Cam for another 5 years.
Well, Justin, we never rehearsed this, so it's kind of fitting that you brought up two subjects that I thought really stood out in this mini camp. You mentioned Cam Jordan. A big reason the New Orleans Saints are one of the elite franchises in the NFL is because they know when to dump guys and they know when to re-sign guys. And it didn't surprise me at all that Cam Jordan gets another contract. And I think Mike Triplett put this out there. He's the first Saints rookie in the Payton era to get a third contract. And richly deserved for Cam Jordan. I mean, boy, you can't argue with what he's done. He seemingly is not letting his foot off the gas either. He just seems to get better and better every year, and you need to lock in a guy like that. Michael Thomas, Sean Payton told me when I asked about Michael Thomas, the fact he really didn't get any help last year, he quickly said because he'd already answered questions about Cam Jordan, well, he's next. So you see the pecking order there. You see Cam Jordan and then Michael Thomas, and then you're going to get that big run of guys from the 2017 rookie class. So it's going to be a lot of money for the New Orleans Saints. But you know what? That's what good teams do. And those were big headlines here. And I thought another big headline this minicamp, Justin, was the quarterback position. And it kind of leads me to the biggest headline was guys got reps that needed reps. Now, Drew Brees was dealing with a financial case with a jeweler in California, so he couldn't be there. But it gave Teddy Bridgewater a chance to man the practice. It gave Taysom Hill more snaps. And on the offensive line, for different reasons, it was interesting that Eric McCoy got a lot of snaps at center, and that was because Larry Warford's hurt, so the veteran Nick Easton spotted Larry Warford at guard. Now, Easton and McCoy are going to go toe-to-toe, but the quarterbacks get reps. Brees doesn't need minicamp. And Nick Easton doesn't need this, but Eric McCoy does. So I think that's great for this football team.
No, I agree. Especially for McCoy, getting those reps, I think, is huge, especially if he'll be playing at the center position. It'll be interesting to see the battle between him and Nick Easton when Easton's able to move back to the center position. Like you said, he's filling in for Warford right now. I did read during training camp that McCoy struggled with some of the snaps to Drew Brees. I'm sure they'll get that figured out. I'm not worried about that. But yeah, anytime backups can get reps is huge, especially for the QB position. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what transpires going forward.
I think a part of McCoy's problem with that was he played in a different offense at Texas A&M, so
Right.
he's kind of getting used to the drill, and that's exactly why he needed those snaps, not Nick Easton. Now, I don't want to get too excited. We should almost tape a warning. The following statement, it doesn't mean to be misconstrued as overhyped because it's Saints minicamp, but Jared Cook, the tight end, looked exceptional. And when you're a veteran and you're coming in, of course, you want to make a good first impression. But this leads me to Scott Shanle. Now, Scott Shanle played with the New Orleans Saints for many years. He was a true professional. But what's great about having him on this podcast is he can tell us things he wouldn't tell me for obvious reasons when he was a player. He could be more honest. Well, Shanley's on vacation enjoying his family in Nebraska, but we interrupted his vacation to get some thoughts on minicamp, and you'll get some insights from Scott Shanle on how veterans kind of approach this 3-day minicamp bonanza. All right, Scott, this NFL offseason for a veteran, how does a veteran approach minicamp? All you guys say all the right things to us when you're players, but now that you're not active anymore, be honest with me, how do veterans feel about minicamp?
Veterans hate minicamp. It's just the easiest way to say it. It is the days are brutally long. You're there 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. It was just, you sit there and you try to do all the right things. You're installing defenses that you've ran since you were a rookie. It's very vanilla, very base. And I think the more you play as a player, you quickly realize, man, we don't run any of this stuff come the fall because we're game planning everything. So we're wasting our time. My body hurts. You're out in the sun. You're out in the heat, and you're sitting there like, these young guys should be doing all this. So the old guys definitely hate it. That's for sure.
Okay, when you're a young guy in the league, how do you approach it?
There's a lot of pressure as a young guy because you're going to get a lot of reps. Obviously, we had 2 practices a day during minicamp for those 3 days or whatever it was. So there's a lot of pressure because it's really your first chance. They've had OTAs, the organized team activities. There's not a whole lot of plays that you get to run. But when you have 2 practices a day in minicamp, the practices are longer. It's kind of your chance to show the coaches what you can do in a training camp environment, despite you have no pads, but you're going to get a lot more reps. You're going to get put in situations where you're going to get a lot more chances to impress the coaches. So it can be a stressful situation because it's your first chance to show the coaches what you can do.
All right. How was Sean Payton in minicamp compared to training camp?
Oh, it's not even close. Once the pads go on, it is it's real football. It's not the underwear Olympics anymore where you're just trying to run plays. When the pads go on, the intensity ratchets up, and the season's right around the corner.
All right, I'll let you go on this. Do you have a favorite minicamp story, or is it all just a big blur?
Minicamp for me is pretty much a blur. I don't really remember any specifics from anyone. I just remember I always remember minicamp thinking, don't get hurt. Because every year you see guys, starters, veteran guys, you always see a couple guys go down with Achilles or a knee or something like that. So I tried to do my job, but I tried to be smart as well so that I could continue to train right before training camp once the real season started. But there's a little bit of pressure on guys to make sure they're smart during that time and not sustain any injuries.
Scott Shanle, uncut, raw opinions on minicamp. You're not going to get that many places, folks. It's always interesting to me. Shanle and I love doing this podcast, but athletes, and I don't blame them. I mean, you're working for a company, basically a football team. You can't say a lot of things when you're a player, but afterwards we kind of get the real deal, and he spelled it out in terms of his thoughts on minicamp. And I know a lot of his teammates and veterans around the league feel the same way. Well, speaking of linebackers, we're going to give you some great interviews. Wil Lutz is coming up. He has some great stuff about his incredible tryout. He didn't even think he'd make the team. What would he do if he wasn't a kicker? And his idol in terms of kickers growing up, and that's going to be in the more likely segment. And he's also going to talk about his very competitive relationship with Thomas Morstead. But before we get to Wil Lutz, let's stay with the linebackers. We had Shanle. Let's talk about Alex Anzalone. Now, Anzalone is an integral part of that 2017 draft class, and he got injured in his rookie season, but he came back and played very well in 2018. It seemed like he made a big play every week, and when healthy, he's always proved at the University of Florida or in the pros that he's a great player. I had a chance to sit down one-on-one with Alex Anzalone, and my first question was, your third year in the league, how much smarter are you?
I couldn't put a thumb on it, but I think that I don't think you become smarter, you become more wise. So I think that's a better way to put it.
This defense, the nucleus, a lot of young players, but you're growing up together. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, as a group, we've had some growing pains and, some areas of improvement, but, the cohesiveness of us is what, can make us great and, one of the top defenses in the league.
Recently, you look at the 2006 draft class, you had Reggie Bush and Marcus Colston go in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. A lot of comparisons between that class and your class in 2017. I think the only difference may be longevity. Do you guys look at that class, kind of role models? That's how you want to pattern your career?
I mean, the longer you play, the better. So I guess you could say that, but I think a lot of us just focus on our day-to-day and, just try to get better every day. And because if you don't, your career is going to be over. So, I think that, yes, that's a good example, but, we just try to focus on us too.
How much pride do you take in being a part of a class that turned out so many starters, though?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. I'm not going to lie, but, yeah, it's cool. I think you take a little bit of pride, but, we're a team and, we just want to get better.
You guys have had to grow up in a hurry. You've had some success, but you've had tough losses 2 years in a row. Yeah. How does that help you moving forward?
I think that it definitely helps. You obviously it teaches you got to get over a loss. At the end of the day, this is just a game, and life moves on and seasons move on. We're already on to our next year, and after that tough loss, so I think that you just got to move. I don't know. You just got to move on.
Last question I have: what will the difference be in this defense this year compared to the last couple of years?
I think that just to focus on the details and getting better situationally. If third downs, statistically we weren't where we want to be, but a couple of third down stops in a game can make a huge difference for that. So I think that's just one of the areas that we want to improve. Not
smart, wise. A wise answer from Alex Anzalone, who's poised for a big third season in the NFL. It's amazing to me how well the Saints have drafted. I'm going to get back to that 2017 class in just a second, but I'm looking at this year's draft. One guy who stood out in minicamp, and again, they're wearing underwear. They're wearing shorts out there. It's not full pad. But Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he doesn't play like a rookie. He was out there, mixing it up. He wanted to hit somebody, and he's going to be an interesting guy to watch in training camp to see if he's in the middle of a brouhaha or something, because I was really impressed with his – he was fearless out there. Kind of reminded me of Kenny Vaccaro. I remember the first practice, Kenny Vaccaro, he was like Rob Ryan's hero out there, just hitting everybody, put a huge lick on Pierre Thomas at training camp. But keep an eye on Chauncey Gardner-Johnson when training camp rolls around. But between he and Eric McCoy, they have some interesting guys in this rookie class. The Saints have drafted so well recently. It's a big part of their success. The 2017 class is kind of coming to their own. They've played really well their first 2 years, and they're veterans at this point. I mean, you look at them, they've had a lot of playoff games under their belt. They've had the ebb and flow of success and then huge disappointments in Minnesota and, of course, the no call. But I asked Sean Payton to really, how do you compare the 2017 class compared to the 2006 class? And, he gave me a good answer on how really they're benchmarks for his time here in New Orleans. I mean, the 2006 class, they set the tone, and the 2017 class kind of were a big part of the reset button for Sean Payton after those 3 straight 7 and 9 years. But the answer for Payton was, let's see how long those 2017 guys play, paraphrasing what he says. And really that's the only difference. I mean, you can make a case with, we just talked to Anzalone of the 2017 New Orleans Saints. They're more talented maybe than the 2006 group, but so many of those 2006 guys played for over 10 years, and that's such a rarity. Anzalone's kind of injury prone. Kamara hasn't proven he can be the main guy. We'll see if they can do it as long as 2006. So right now, until they play 10 years, 2006 is still my best class under Sean Payton, Justin.
I agree. I mean, the 2017 class is probably the more talented, but the longevity of that 2006 class, for how long so many of those players played, is rare to see. And so, as of now, it'll be interesting to see. Maybe 10 years down the road, we can look back and say the 2017 class was the better class. But for now, you got to go with the 2006 class and how well that class turned out.
All right, without further delay, we get into this week's guest. We stay with the special teams. He is a Georgia native, went to Georgia State, but ever since he burst on the scene in New Orleans, he has been money for the New Orleans Saints. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome in the starting kicker for the Saints, Wil Lutz. Will, appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let's just talk about, the thing I want to get to before your success here is I remember Coach Payton, had two veterans in camp, and then all of a sudden, this guy named Wil Lutz had this great tryout, and then you become the starting kicker, and he comes out in front of the media and says, he had a great tryout. I mean, for a lot of kickers, that would have been a lot of pressure. It seems like you embraced the moment at that point.
Well, I was very fortunate to have Coach stick his neck out for me like that. I mean, I did have a great workout, but it's hard to live up to words like that. But, when he sticks his neck out like that, fortunately he gave me a longer leash because of, the things he said. And, that came with a lot of bumps in the road. My rookie year wasn't as smooth as it could have been, and I'm very grateful that he stuck with me through all the bumps. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. It's been amazing.
We've always heard about this tryout. Take me back to that tryout. What was your mindset, and was how was that atmosphere for you?
Yeah, I remember like it was yesterday. They brought me in here and they had me go warm up while the team was still out there. So I'm like walking out there in a t-shirt that's way too big on me, shorts that don't fit me right. And coach comes over here and I just say, hey, thanks. And he's just like, all right, we'll watch you. And I went out there and I kicked. And I remember he stopped me in between kicks. And I mean, it literally had me shaking in my cleats. It was a different feeling, something I had never felt, but it obviously prepared me for, the first game. I'm asked to kick a 61-yard game winner, and, it didn't faze me. Unfortunately, I missed it, but I think just like little instances like that where, I'm so wide-eyed just to meet Coach Payton prepared me for those situations.
And Coach Payton keeps things close to the vest. He doesn't really reveal things like tryouts or behind the scenes. For him to say something shows how good your tryout was, but what was his reaction afterwards? Did you have a good feel that maybe I have a chance to make this team?
No, I was very naive. I really had no idea what was going on. The whole world was kind of shocked by it, by the situation. But I specifically remember going up to him and saying, "Hey, thanks for having me out." And he's like, "You're not leaving." I was like, "Oh, okay." And I think they had signed me to the practice squad while they figured out what they wanted to do. But I just remember him saying that. And once he told me that, I kind of realized like, wow, this is kind of getting real. And I woke up. I went home, took a nap, and I woke up to my agent blowing me up like, hey, they just cut the kicker. And it was a pretty wild 24 hours.
Let's fast forward to this offseason. I mean, you've really established yourself here in New Orleans, but every time I talk to you, I know you always have the mindset that I'm not content. I always want to get better. How are you approaching this offseason after such a great season you had a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it works in this position is you only have one on a roster, so you're competing with everybody else around the NFL and everybody trying to get into the NFL. And, regardless of the contract situation now, it's that's only as good as, what it's worth, right? So I treat every day like a new day. I compete with myself, compete with, even me and Morstead, try to make as much competitions as we can because, you have to stay like that. You have to be ready. And I think that's what makes, the best product on the field.
I mentioned Georgia State, and the life of a kicker. A lot of guys don't get drafted. I mean, that's the majority of you. You really don't know when you're going to get that chance. I know. I talked to a lot of guys. You'll see each other in airports because you have similar tryouts. Coming out of college, what was your mindset about playing in the NFL?
Well, I started studying for law school already.
Really?
Because I really didn't think it was too foreseeable, unfortunately, but. I'm very fortunate that the Ravens had a staff that was very familiar with kickers specifically, with the special teams tenure they have there with Coach Rosberg, Randy Brown, and their head coach.
We're not live.
Harbaugh, yeah. And they've been around the game for a long time, so they know the position really well, and they saw the potential I had. And when you're able to go up to compete with clearly one of the best kickers in the league, and Justin Tucker, that's an opportunity I couldn't turn down, and here we are now.
I don't want to skim over it. Law school, huh? You almost what motivated you to do that potentially?
Well, that was the plans. I wasn't completely set on it, but I was a political science and criminal justice major in college, and I wanted to get into corporate law, and so that was going to be the route I tried to take. The NFL didn't work out, and fortunately, it worked out.
You think you'll ever revisit that? I mean, you guys have an off season. Would you do that after your playing career is over potentially?
Yeah, at some point I would like to go back to school. I'm not positive it'd be in law, but the plan is one of these off seasons to go back, get a degree.
Mm-hmm. All right, Justin, you know what time it is. We're not going to let Wil Lutz go before he ventures into this. All right, more likely 3 hypotheticals with Wil Lutz. You don't know what's coming, do you?
I have no idea.
And I love it. We're in the middle of your locker room and everybody's staring at us. We're just going to take this on head to head, aren't we?
Let's go. Here we go.
When was the point? Was there a turning point? Was there one kick more likely where you felt like, you know what? I have a place in this league. I'm going to stick around.
That's tough. There was a game my rookie year with 4-for-4 against Seattle. I think we won the game by 3. And I look back after that game. I was kind of like, man, I belong to be. I need to be here. And then the other one would be the Carolina game winner my rookie year. It's a 52-yarder. It kind of hit me hard. I was like, this is where I need to be.
All right, more likely number 2. You mentioned Thomas Morstead. We had him on earlier in our podcast, and he has a ton of respect for you. He loves the relationship you guys have, but he wants one shot to kick a field goal. He says he's pretty good in practice. More likely, will that ever happen? Maybe you guys are up by 21 points. Can Morstead do it? You have faith in him.
Hey, I told you we compete at everything. So if he wants a field goal, I want a punt. But Coach Payton handle that, and we'll just keep doing what we do.
All right. You're doing good. Final, more likely. You grew up, obviously. I don't know if you were a big football fan growing up, but more likely, was there a kicker that you kind of looked up to, patterned your game after, and you said, you know what, I want to be that guy?
Yeah, Adam Vinatieri, no doubt.
Oh, really?
As I got older and towards college, it was Justin Tucker because he kind of came onto the scene my sophomore year in college, and he was, the next great thing. But Adam Vinatieri's been doing it for so long and at such a high level. Ever since I started kicking a soccer ball, I was watching Vinatieri. So, yeah, Vinatieri.
You nailed it. After the music died down, like the mood kind of died down. They didn't pay as much attention to us, did they?
Yeah, the music got a little awkward, but I think we're good now.
Before I let you go, I just want to ask you this. Growing up, were you a soccer player? Did you think you played in the NFL? Was there that moment where you thought, you know what, this is what I want to do is kick?
I wanted to be in the MLS growing up. I played soccer from 3 to 18, and it was my brother got asked to be the kicker for the football team, and I was the annoying little brother that wanted to be better than him. So I joined the team my junior year in high school, and I was like, this is what I want to do because I was lazy and didn't want to run anymore. So I started kicking.
All right, well, listen, I know it gets busy during minicamp. You got a lot of responsibilities, a lot of meetings. We really appreciate your time. Hope to have you back on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Wil Lutz, outstanding stuff. I wasn't going to throw him the "Were you a Falcons fan growing up?" because if he was, he's not going to admit it on this podcast because we kind of talked about that before we started the interview. But Wil Lutz, boy, that was one of the more interesting interviews we've had. Maybe one day he'll be a lawyer, but right now he's one of the best kickers in the NFL. And Justin, for my money, Wil Lutz should have been a Pro Bowler last year for the Saints.
Yeah, I was surprised he didn't go to the Pro Bowl. Every year there's a player or two that fans think should make the Pro Bowl and they don't. And I guess, unfortunately, this past year it was a kicker.
You know what? Wil Lutz, to me, the life of a kicker is so crazy because the majority of them don't get drafted. The majority of them have a strange story in how they made the NFL. But I would have loved to have watched that tryout because the stories were so interesting because Sean Payton doesn't let us behind the curtain too much. And when Wil Lutz made the team, he said on numerous occasions his tryout was the best I've ever seen from a kicker. I mean, that's unbelievable, that he would admit that, and that Wil Lutz would not get nervous and thrive after a statement from his head coach. And, I'm glad to get Wil Lutz. It was fun getting him in the Saints locker room. But, Justin, we've talked about this. Minicamp's a good time to reconnect with guys and set up things if you're doing a podcast. And we're so excited about some of the guests that we're going to have. We've had a lot of former players, and we're going to keep doing that. but we're also going to have a lot of current players in the next month and a half before training camp. You and I have talked about some of the guests. I don't want to get too crazy and reveal them yet, but Justin, there's a lot of great content coming up in this podcast before training camp starts in the next month and a half. And Saints fans, if you're craving football, you got to keep it here because we're going to give you guests and stories you haven't heard before. Justin, and we talked about all the guys we're going to have coming up.
Yeah, I'm real excited. It's been great having former players on the show. I believe Thomas Morstead was the only current player we've had on the podcast. But with some of the names that we could be having on the show coming up, I think Saints fans are going to be really excited about. It'll be great to get their perspective on what's happened the last couple of seasons and also to hear about what they think of this upcoming season. So I think Saints fans are in for a real treat.
No doubt about it. In this business of podcasting or media, you never want to jinx it too much, but I am really excited about what we're going to have. We're going to have major contributors on the current Saints roster on both sides of the ball. So very excited about the future. We'd really like to thank Alex Anzalone, like to thank Wil Lutz, and of course, Scott Shanle taking time from his vacation in the great state of Nebraska as he's enjoying his family and going home. I'd like to thank Justin Thomas. Justin, great job today, my friend.
Thank you. You as well.
Yeah, we'll jump back in next week, and I promise you we're going to have a big guest next week and a lot coming up, as I mentioned, before training camp rolls around, and it is right around the corner as we're in mid-June. That is hard to believe. Well, you know what? If you haven't heard any of our podcasts, you can catch us on iTunes, on Podbean, on Stitcher, on Spotify, and Google. What's great about us is you can go back and look at interviews we've had with Marcus Colston or Pierre Thomas or Lance Moore, Roman Harper, and they're really evergreen, meaning you could listen to them a year from now. You still enjoy them. Great memories of their football careers and their time with the Saints. And, of course, the Sean Payton era just keeps extending and extending. Well, we will talk to you soon next week, but we really appreciate you listening in. This has been your Saints Minicamp Wrap. I'm Mike Neighbors. We'll talk to you next time.